It might be chickpeas with either spinach or mulukhia. I don't know.
Okay. I don't know. I didn't know if it had like a specific name.
Is it mulukhia or?
Is it like spicy or not?
Okay. It's okay. All right. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. Yeah. Today, inshallah, like we had mentioned before. Yeah, Awad. You can't play in here. It's all right. Just you can keep your football. Just don't throw it. Yes, please. Yes. What's up? Yeah.
You have your office key because I'm getting a light headache. So I'm gonna sit with you. If I get worse, I'm gonna go lay down till you guys finish.
Today, inshallah, we're going to talk about backbiting. I know this is an issue, unfortunately, many of us suffer from, and it is something that we're always seeking ilaj for, something that we're always seeking a means of rectifying. And inshallah, I hope that we're able to get to the different points where Ghazāli actually talks about the things that cause people to backbite, and also discuss those things which will help stop an individual from backbiting. So, and he basically breaks it down into 8 parts. These 8 parts, inshallah, we'll be discussing in the coming weeks, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Today, we'll probably be able to get through the first 2. And basically what he's going to do in the first part, or in this section, is he's going to talk about the criticism of backbiting, of ghiba. And all right, I'll speak up a little bit, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. That should help a little bit. Yeah. I'm sorry? I do, inshallah, I'll try to speak up, and then yeah, if you could. So what we'll talk about, inshallah, is the verses in the ahadith that mention ghiba, or that talk about backbiting. And then, inshallah, we'll also talk about the definition of backbiting. What is it that actually backbiting consists of? What are the different things? Because there are different understandings that we all have of what backbiting actually is. So it's important for us to understand, is this truly backbiting? When the things that we're talking about, do they fall under backbiting, or do they fall under something else? And just because it's not backbiting, as we'll find out, it doesn't mean that it's right. It actually could be worse in some cases. So first, he brings this verse where he says, "وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا أَيُحِبُّ أَحَدُكُمْ أَن يَأْكُلَ لَحْمَ أَخِيهِ مَيْتًا فَكَرِهْتُمُوهُ." And the verse goes on, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ. Would any of you like to eat the flesh of your dead brother? No, you would hate it. So over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he brings this allegory of doing ghiba, of backbiting, with consuming the flesh of your dead brother. Why bring that analogy, or why bring that metaphor? Huh?
It's something disgusting.
Okay, it's something that's definitely disgusting, right? Nobody's a carnivore, right? Nobody likes eating people. What is the other thing? Okay, to show how extreme it is, to show how bad it is, for sure, definitely. But there are other ways that he Azza wa Jalla could have done this, right? Why this specifically? Or what are some very uniquely negative things about this? Yes. Okay, how harmful it is. Absolutely. What? All right, so it's interesting how he Azza wa Jal uses this to equate with backbiting. So what are the shared characteristics between them? So when we talk about eating the flesh of your dead brother versus backbiting him, what are some things that are shared? I'm sorry? Right, he doesn't know, right? There's nothing this dead person can do. And not just that, this dead person, it's really a talk of his ability. While I don't mean to create such vivid imagery behind this, but as I'm cutting a piece of flesh from this dead person, what can he do about it? Nothing. The only person that can stop it is who? Is me, right? This is the only person that can stop it. So not only am I cutting into this person with the inability of him to do anything, I'm actively removing that piece from him, and then I'm taking it a step further, right? It's not enough that I'm mutilating his body, but I'm taking it now that step further and actually consuming it. right? To this extent, this is how dangerous this is. This is how problematic this is. Is the volume okay? You guys need the mic. It's kind of low. Okay. Thanks. Sorry, I'm also not very loud. It's like somebody backing into the into the message. Like what is going on? All right, is that a little bit better?
Yeah, way better.
Okay, alhamdulillah. Wait.
It's too loud.
Wait, now it's too loud. Let me. Here we go. I think that I can play with the mic a little bit, inshallah. So, like we had said, that this idea of actually backbiting, one of the major issues and the major problems with it is that the person who is being backbitten can do nothing about it, right? So when we had talked about actively cutting into the person, actually mutilating the person, removing a piece of flesh from him, he has a complete inability to do anything about it. And the only person that can actually make that change is the person who is actively backbiting. And on top of the other things that you guys are talking about, like this is something that is so detested. It's something that's so disliked. Like even the imagery behind it is just so graphic and it's so disgusting. This is the same way we should deal with backbiting. And this is the same way we should look at it when we talk about it. There are a number of hadith that I'd like to mention that Imam Ghazāli brings up. He said, all things of a Muslim are inviolable for his brother in faith, his blood, his wealth, and his honor. So over here, Ghazāli, he points out, he said, look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he equates his honor to his blood and his wealth. Why is that important? And why make that equation there? Or is it not important? I'm sure we understand that it is, but the question is why. So the question is over here, when we talk about a Muslim's honor, why is it equivalent to his wealth and his self, his blood? Like his wealth and his blood, why is that an easy, yes, please. No, without sugar. Why is it so easy for us to visualize his wealth and his blood, right? It's easy to visualize that these things are inviolable. These things are haram. Why? Why is it easy to picture those? Yes. Okay, they're tangible, yes. The same thing, right? These are actually tangible things. Like you can actually physically see when we hurt someone. You can actually physically see when we're taking somebody's money. But when it comes to his honor, this is why it becomes so problematic, because his honor is something that is what? You better not have like filled it to, okay. I thought you like filled it to the complete top. Huh? It's something that's immaterial. It's something that's intangible. And many times it's also something that's difficult to gauge. Right? It's something that is very difficult to gauge. So when we talk about an individual's honor, right, his wealth is clear, right? It's something that's clear. It's something that's defined. When you talk about an individual's blood, it's something that's clear. It's something that's defined. You know, it's not like, okay, well, it's okay for me to kick him, but it's not okay for me to punch him, right? You know, it's very clear. Like I am causing harm to the person in front of me, and that is enough for me to define that. But when it comes to causing harm to somebody's honor, how is that defined? Is it subjective or no? Right. So if, for example, you'd be like, no, you're really not that tall. Did I say anything bad? Is there anything wrong? Huh? It's like all the short people are like, yeah, no, no, it's you're not really putting the person down, right? You're not putting the person down in any way, but the person himself, he might feel like I've been dishonored. Yes or no? He might feel that. So here, how do you determine what are those lines of honor? And when is it a real thing? And we might say something to someone that does dishonor, like it is what we would consider in society to be dishonorable, but he himself doesn't take it to heart, or he himself doesn't care about it. If I said to somebody like, you know, you're overweight, for example, this is something that might be insulting for some, yes? But that person might not take it as an insult. Or you know, what's another good example? Like you're really tall, like you're extremely tall. Some people might take that as an insult. And others might think, well, this is completely fine. Or within society, it might be considered insulting. But it's actually, for that individual, it might not be. So like we said, these two things are clearly defined when it comes to his blood and his wealth. His honor is something that it gets a little bit more subjective. So here, the Prophet ﷺ, as we get into more of these ahadith, it's very clearly defined by him. What does it mean to dishonor somebody? What does it mean to actually backbite them? Here, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, don't be jealous of one another, nor outbid one another. So over here, what is he talking about? So if there's an auction and I know Nazim is bidding on the same item, can I now not outbid him? Huh? It's what? It's not what? Right, it's not talking about actual bidding, right? It's not talking about an auction. So what is he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, talking about? Yes. I'm sorry? Oh, a competition. Okay, so this is actually talking about in a transaction, in a sales transaction. Where can you imagine this becoming problematic? When you're undercutting someone, right? Why? Because what am I trying to do? Right, I'm trying to hurt him now, right? So when I undercut someone, or if I know somebody wants an item and I don't really care, and this happens, right? If there's a car and there's somebody who I dislike who wants that car, I might buy that car out of what? Out of spite. Just why? Because my intent is to hurt that person. So over here, he said, nor bear grudges, nor turn your backs on one another. Meaning what? Like physically, just don't turn around when I'm talking to someone?
Meaning like don't abandon it.
Or don't abandon, right? And here, and we had talked about this in the usul class, there are many times where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses what? Or he uses figures of speech, he uses idioms. Even the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are many places where he would use idioms, he would use these figures of speech in order to bring some kind of representation to help the people understand ideas and concepts better. Don't try to undercut your brother, right? This is a little bit different than outbidding, right? Outbidding can be for a higher price, undercutting can be for a lower one. The next one, be brothers to each other, servants of Allah. How do we not do any of these things? Right? Are some of these feelings natural?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So if we understand that these feelings are natural, how do we as Muslims do? Is having those feelings problematic? Like, is me being jealous of a brother or a sister, is that in itself, that feeling of jealousy, is that a problem? No.
All emotions are okay except for jealousy, because of the specific hadith that says jealousy is your good deeds like fire.
Okay.
But in general, we do our best to control it in our heart.
Okay. Wait, hold on. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're saying that there are certain feelings that we are obligated to remove and expel. Okay, so here the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have a hadith. He says, if you see something you like of your brothers, you should say what? You make dua. You make dua for him. Say MashaAllah. Why? Okay, to avoid the evil eye. Good. What else? I'm sorry? So there's something in Islam called ghibta. You guys, have you heard this term before? Ghibta. What is ghibta? Ghibta. Okay, great. Mashallah, excellent. So it's basically when I see something in a brother or a sister that I think is like, man, this person has a lot of money and they're really generous. So I'm jealous that I'm what? I'm not as generous. So there are a few ways for me to deal with that emotion. I can want to take the wealth away from that person, right? That's one feeling. And what is the other feeling I can have? That I strive to? I try to be like that person, right? Without what? Without trying to undermine or harm that person. That I'm happy for what that person has, but I also want to strive to have what they have. So now we're starting to get a better understanding of what jealousy is, what ghibta is, or the different types of jealousy, and where backbiting occurs, and why some of these issues are problematic and some of these feelings are problematic. But the base experience or the base feeling in and of itself, these feelings that we have of anger, jealousy, malice, hatred, is Allah going to hold me accountable for those? Not the feeling. I agree. And I'll take this even a step further. What if I want to sin? What if I have the urge to lie? As long as I don't act on it. So what does that tell us? How do we deal with feelings, right? That's a completely negative feeling, right? It's a completely negative feeling that we will have at one time or another. We might get the urge to lie, or the urge to backbite, or the urge to do something wrong. It becomes a problem when I act on it. So what about all these other feelings? The anger, the malice, the hatred, the jealousy. Where do you think it's going to be very problematic? And what is different in both situations? Huh? One situation is wanting to sin, right? The desire to sin. And the other situation is malice, hatred, anger, and jealousy. So we said in this situation, well, just don't act on the feeling. And if I don't act on the feeling, what happens? I'm actually rewarded. I'm actually rewarded. Like in this other situation, what am I supposed to do? Excellent. All right, so I should work to remove these feelings, but at the same time, I won't be accountable for the feeling in and of itself. There's no doubt about that. The problem is when I start breeding these feelings, right? When I start fanning them and I start encouraging them, even if I don't act on them. Because what is going to happen eventually? I will act on them, for sure, because now it's consumed my heart. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, when I was taken up to the heaven, I passed by people who had nails of copper and were scratching their faces with their breasts. I said, who are these people, Jibreel? Yani basically, they were scratching themselves like this, right? They're coming down to their chests and they're scratching themselves. Who are these people, Jibreel? He replied, they are those who were given to backbiting and who asperse people's honor. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. Yes.
I have a question about like some of the hadiths that talk about like whoever does this action, like this will happen. Are those meant to be taken like literally, like that will literally happen, or is that just a point of emphasis?
So it could be either or. It could be either or depending on the context. So there you have some hadith that are clearly for emphasis. Like for example, the Prophet ﷺ, he said the prayer of the one who drinks alcohol is not accepted for 40 days. So over here, does this mean, on the 41st day that things will start being accepted? Was 40 meant to be in a long, just meant to be a long period of time? Was it meant to be a discouragement for prayer? Like clearly not, right? It's clearly not meant to be a discouragement for prayer. And at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He forgives everything except shirk, right? And we understand that. So how do you apply and how does this, it could be an exaggeration. It could be taken literally. Like I think there's room for both understanding. Here, the Prophet ﷺ, he says that you who state belief by their tongue and belief did not enter their hearts yet, do not backbite Muslims and do not search for their faults. For if anyone searches for the faults in others, Allah will search for his fault. And if Allah searches for the fault of anyone, he will be disgraced even in his own home. That meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expose him. Allah protect us. It was revealed to Musa that the person who repents from backbiting will be the last person to enter paradise, and the one who is adamant on it will be the first to enter the fire. This is a historical report. What can we benefit from this? I'm sorry? The severity of backbiting, and that we should not what? We should not even fall into it, right? This to that extent, that we should avoid even falling into it, because even falling into it means that there's going to have to be tawbah and there'll still be an effect of it. Mujahid said concerning the verse, وَيْلٌ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ, that the humaza is the one that curses and slanders people, and the lumaza is the one that eats their flesh. This is the translation of the verse. Qatada said that the punishment of the grave is from 3 categories. He said a third of the people who are punished in the grave are because of their backbiting, a third from poor bathroom hygiene and they didn't protect themselves, and lastly, a third from tail carrying from namima. Hassan said, I swear by Allah that backbiting takes from a believer's religion faster than a scavenger takes from a body. We met some of the companions that they didn't see true worship in fasting and in prayer, but in preserving people's honor. And this is something that we had emphasized and re-emphasized time and time again in our discussions about taqwa. Taqwa revolves around what? Manners. And we summarize that how? In relationships, ahsant. And why do they say this? Because fasting and prayer is what? Who is the fasting and the prayer for? It's for me, it's for myself, right? When I come and I pray in the masjid, am I benefiting someone else? No, right? Like I'm benefiting myself. And even the fast, am I benefiting others? No. Many times my fasting will hurt others, right? Especially in the food line. Allah musta'an. But it's which is sad. I mean, it really is sad if the fasting was meant to be a shield, right? A sawmu junnah. That the fasting is meant to be a shield. A shield from what? A shield from mistreatment of others, right? I shouldn't be hurting others. I shouldn't be looking down on others. I shouldn't be cutting others in line. I shouldn't be trying to take more food. The fasting should make me more aware of these things. That is the purpose of the fast. The purpose of the fast isn't so that I can start eating and I can consume as much as I can. That's not the idea. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's not in need of me not to eat or not to drink or not to be intimate with my spouse, right? He's not in need of that. We are in need of Him. In part of the lesson of fasting, part of the lesson in fasting is learning how to deal with each other when we are on our wit's end, right? If you take away food from someone, they'll get angry. If you take away something to drink from someone, they get upset, right? The ability to make, have intercourse with your spouse, you get upset, right? These are all things individually, if you look at them, they make you upset. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes these things away, He's putting you in a situation now where you're at your end, right? You're at your end of your tolerance level. Now learn how to deal with people. Learn how to deal with others. Learn how to express your patience. And this is the opportunity we should all take, right? That is one of the main things we should take away from the fast. Not on how long I can stop eating, not how long. Oh yeah, sure. Like not how long I can stop eating or drinking, right? There's not much of a challenge there. It's like, okay, I can fast 10 hours. Well, I can fast 12. I can fast 22, right? What am I doing in that time? If I understand that the Sawm is written why? كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, to get taqwa, so that I learn how to deal and establish those relationships with others, with myself, and most importantly, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he said, whenever you feel like mentioning someone's faults, mention your own first. Sounds very familiar. It's unfortunate we never get to this point, right? Abu Hurairah said, you see the crust in another's eyes, but see beauty in your own. So when we wake up, what happened? We have like crust in our eyes, right? And when I see it on other people, I think it's what? I think it's crust. But when I look in the mirror, I think it's amazing. I think it's beautiful. Why? Because I'm so quick to look at the faults in others, but I'm so far and behind in looking in my own faults and my own shortcomings. Al-Hasan used to say, son of Adam, you will not realize the reality of belief until you see the shortcomings of others in yourself. This is a beautiful statement. He says, until you make an effort to remove that shortcoming, and when you do, then you have busied yourself with yourself. And this is the most beloved action to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That I busy myself with myself. I'm constantly working on improving myself and bettering myself. And if I'm constantly working on bettering the people around me, what have I done? Huh? So if I'm only thinking about others, where have I placed myself? above them. Right? It's a very dangerous place. That I've placed myself above everyone else. And because I'm above everyone, I can now be mankind's savior, right? And I can fix everybody else's problems. And not just that. The people who are busy always correcting and talking to others, how are their relationships with others? They're bad. Right? Nobody wants to talk to that person. Even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he talks about the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he says, لو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفض من حولك. He said, had you been hard-hearted and stern, then what the people would have what? They would have ran away from you. Just imagine everybody who came into the Prophet's masjid, your pants are too long, you can't do like this, you can't talk like that, you shouldn't sit like this. Who are you? Sister, why is your hijab like that? Just imagine. Just imagine that type of person. Who wants to be near that type of person? Even that person doesn't want to be near that type of person, right? That's the amazing thing. Because when that person, somebody pushes him, be like, well, akhi, you shouldn't do like this. You should, who are you to tell me? You know what I mean? Like, and you just have this back and forth going on. Like even the tolerant, like he can't tolerate himself, let alone other people tolerating that individual. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us insight and allow us to see that. Because even understanding, because some people might be like, okay, well, how do I command the good and forbid the evil? Well, number one, nobody obligated you on an individual level to command the good and forbid the people of all the people. Secondly, the first thing that needs to be established, anytime I deal with someone is what? A relationship. How can I advise somebody I don't know? There's a reason the Prophet ﷺ became a prophet at 40. What was he doing for 40 years? He was establishing relationships with people. People trusted him. They turned to him. They relied on him, ﷺ. And that's how we interact, and that's how we should deal with people. I had a child come up to me, and he goes to me, he's like, this is bid'ah. I was like, Jazakallah khair. I appreciate that. Why do you say that? He's like, because the Christians do it. I was like, okay. I said, you see that over there? He's like, what? I was like, it's a clock. He's like, okay. I said, did Muslims invent clocks? He's like, no. I said, but we use the clock to pray, right? He was like, yeah. And I was like, so Christians created a tool to help us pray. And they use the same tool to set their prayer times too. Is there a problem? And he was confused. He was like totally confused. I said, if I'm using this as a tool, why is it a problem for you? I said, secondly, you don't know me. Like, you have no idea who I am. And not because of my position of, I said, you have no idea who I am. Like, you don't know me. I said, is it fair for you to walk up to strangers and the first thing you tell them is what they're doing wrong? I said, how many people do you think? I said, I'm willing to talk to you. I said, how many people do you think would curse you out or turn away from you or not talk to you again? I said, I'm taking this as a teaching opportunity for you to understand on how to deal with others in the future. That if you want to advise someone, have a conversation with them first. Learn who they are. I said, you don't even know my name. After you have that conversation, then let's talk. I have no issue. I have no problem. I hope so. I hope so. But so because here, and the reason why was it that I was able to engage him in that way? Because he opened the door on himself, right? A lot of people will say, okay, well, how do you give someone advice when they ask for it? Like, volunteered advice is usually the one that is the least receptive. Like, nobody wants to be in a position where they are advised. But we should strive for it, for sure. The Prophet ﷺ, even he was ordered, وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ, and seek counsel from them. Like, we should all seek advice. It's something that's really fundamental, something that's really important. It's a fundamental part of our religion. But some of us just don't. Like, we just don't seek advice. So what should we do? We should, on a personal level, we should make an effort to seek it. And when should we give it? When we're asked. Like, nobody wants to hear me talk, right? They're willing to hear me talk when they ask. But when I start volunteering information, It's very simple to shut that conversation down. How? You just tell them I didn't ask you. Like, it's as simple as that. Like, who are you? I didn't ask you. So establishing that relationship is something that's extremely fundamental in order to help us and help build those bridges when we want to advise and how we want to advise. And the best thing to do always is just looking at our own shortcomings, because this helps us realize that my biggest obstacle is what? Is myself, right? And that's something that's really important for me to understand that I'm not a victim. Yes?
Is there an exception to the rule on giving advice?
Like your kids. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so everybody who you're responsible for, you're responsible for them, right? And that's, there's a direct responsibility that's there. In general, this is just talking about strangers, but even with our children, once, what happens is, why do they listen to us when they're smaller? Or why do they listen to us more usually when they're smaller? Huh? Well, the authority is definitely there, right? So there's a sense of authority. What else? They don't know anything else, right? When a child looks to his father or looks to his mother, when they're really young, their father and mother are the ones that know everything. And as the child grows, what happens? They have more exposure, right? They're exposed to their friends, they're exposed to teachers, right? There's so many outlets of exposure that they have, is that all of a sudden, what happens to the parents? Right? When they become like older, right? And then things kind of balance out. But there comes a point where like there's full trust, and then they start losing the trust in their parents, right? And it starts diminishing. It kind of reaches its peak when they're teenagers, right? Where they completely lose, like they completely don't trust their parents anymore. At that point, does it make sense to go and start advising them at every single moment? Even then, it depends. Why? Because every child's personality is different. You know, wallahi, I wish there was like a recipe or like, you know, like a prescription, like this is the way to do it. There's not. There's just not. Every child needs to be taken on an individual basis. And you know what I mean? And I'll be very honest with you, we're all figuring it out. Right? Nobody has it figured out. We're all figuring it out. But the one thing we need to do is we need to figure it out together. Right? This is the one failing we have as a community. We are so worried about our pride. We're so worried about our honor that we're not willing to ask others or tell them, I'm having XYZ problem with my son or XYZ problem with my daughter. I don't know what to do. And we are willing to ask that question, but when? When it's too late, when it's already broken. So, and I say this, like, by the time things get to my office, it's usually too late, right? It's already reached some kind of breaking point. Had there been steps, like proactive steps before, maybe there could have been some more reconciliation. Malik ibn Dinar said that Isa alayhi salam, he was with his apostles and they passed by the body of a dog. Yes. Yeah, actually, just look at all the verses that talk about taqwa. Like, I'm being very honest. If you look consistently through the verses that talk about taqwa, you will see the direct connection to relationships and how these things are affected. So here, this is not what it's meant, right? So over here, it's not meant that, okay, stop praying and stop fasting and focus on your relationships. It means that don't put one above the other. Don't think because you pray and fast that you don't need to have good relationships. And don't think at the same time that you're focusing and investing in all your relationships, but you can give up fasting and praying. All these things should what? They should go hand in hand. And it's very unfortunate that many times they don't. I remember I was having a conversation with someone one time. They're like, yeah, you know, there are a lot of people who say things are haram. I was like, yeah, just go to the front row of like any masjid. And it's just so representative. And the reason that I mentioned that is, okay, you're in the first row, right? I would imagine that being a member of the first row or the people who are regular in that my heart would be softer. I would be more understanding. I would be more accepting. My relationships would be better. But many times, And I'm not saying it's limited to them, obviously, but many times you'll find like, okay, how's the relationship with the kids? Like, it's not really that good, or with the family, or it's like, you know, if you ask them, I remember, subhanAllah, man, I had, there's this really good brother I knew, you know, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on him. He used to go to the masjid to pray, and he was from the people who prayed in the first row. And as his kids started getting older, his wife was like, she was like, you know, you need to take the kids to the masjid. He's like, yeah, but if I take them, then, you know, I won't be able to pray in the first row. So she said to him, and this like, this answer is like, it still like sticks with me. She's like, you're not obligated to pray in the first row. You're obligated to raise these kids. So, you know, it's not, but the thing is like that there's a lot of things in that dynamic that are really positive, right? You know, the ability to have conversation with your spouse, the ability to engage, the ability to come to like a healthy conclusion. All of these things are really fundamental and they're really important. But like I said, it's not that one is better than the other. It's just that what might have been happening here, and I imagine that this is the case, is that you find many of the companions with the following generation, they just looked at them the way that we look at our, like the generation after ours, which is what? Like they're all spoiled. You know what I mean? Like they're all spoiled, they're lazy. You guys don't know what you do. You know what I mean? Like you don't know what you're doing. And like in our day when we prayed like this, like, you know, in the companions, you have to realize that they dealt with the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They had a direct relationship with him. And this next generation, they had no semblance of that, right? Like, you know, they have no idea what it was like to sit at his feet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or to take his hand, or to hug him, or to hear his recitation. You know what I mean? They weren't blessed in that way. So obviously the level of Iman, there's going to be like, in general, there's going to be like a big gap. You know, there's going to be a big drop. Like even Anas, like, you know, he died like, I think like around 80 Hijri. And when he came, like, and he saw them, he's like, man, you guys don't pray like the Prophet. Like, it's like, you got these fast prayers and, you know, you guys are lazy. It's like, when we used to deal with sins, you know, we used to imagine the smallest sins to be like mountains, like you guys take like the biggest sins and make them into molehills. You know what I mean? Like, so that attitude was definitely there. So even with the companions, here it's just putting things in perspective. It's just putting things in perspective. Like, you know, you guys, your priorities are mixed up. Don't dismiss one for the other. So here, the story of Isa and the apostles, they came across this dead dog and they're like, man, that stinks, it smells. Like, what does that smell? So Isa alayhi salam, he says, and again, this is just to give them to teach them a lesson, saying that look how white the teeth of the dog are. He's pointing out the positive in the situation. Why? Just to teach them, don't get into the habit of backbiting, even for animals, let alone humans. Ali ibn Hussein, he heard another backbiting and said, beware of backbiting, for it is the food of the dogs of the hellfire. Umar radiallahu anhu, he said, practice Allah's remembrance, yani dhikrullah, for it is a cure, and be wary of the people's remembrance, for it is a disease. I'm sorry? So how do we respect animals? That's a good question. And I'll share, there's a hadith of a woman who entered the hellfire because of a cat, and the woman, the prostitute, who entered paradise because of a dog. So do animals have honor? Absolutely. What is their honor? Right, like we don't abuse them, like we take care of them. You know what I mean? Like in the things, if I don't have the ability to take care of an animal, what do? I can put it to sleep, right? You know, it depends. It depends. Like, you know, like, and for example, if an animal gets old, right? You weren't expecting that, right? So no, I mean, animals, like, for example, cats will get to certain ages where it becomes difficult for them to, like, the incontinence, like, you know what I mean? And they're just constantly in pain and constant arthritis because they're not meant to live like 20 years, right? Like cats live like 10 years at most. And I'm not saying it's not painful, but at least putting it out of its misery is better than the alternative, because many times it's difficult to afford the, what do you call it? The medication or the surgery or whatever is required for the animal. So, you know, when I'm given these two choices, like, you know, this is the one that for most people will be the more valid choice. Or sometimes even after, like, sometimes animals get hurt. I remember my wife had a cat, and a cast iron skillet fell on its tail. Like, it was an accident, right? It was an accident, but the cat was just never the same after that. And it happens, like, you have accidents like that. And at the end of the day, I mean, you know, I don't mean to sound inhumane, but animals are animals. You know what I mean? They're not humans. No. Yeah.
That we
Yeah, like so the slaughtering and butchering standards in Muslim countries, it's really bad. Like it's really bad. You know, the Prophet ﷺ, he set guidelines on how the animal's supposed to be slaughtered. You know, make sure that the knife is sharp, make sure that the animals can't see each other. And it's like, okay, all you have to do is put like those filmed like plastic and just pull an animal in, slaughter it, and move it. You know, move on. Like there's so many easy steps that you can do with cheap technology that's available. It's not like it's almost like you're going out of your way, you know, to not care. And but a lot of times that reflects on our societies too, right? You know, and there's a reason people come to America. I'm just saying, like, there's I mean, freedom is one for sure, for sure. No, not just political freedom, but many times religious freedom. I'm sorry, I can park wherever I want, right? Yes. I'm sorry. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And if it's too expensive to do the ilaj, it's too expensive to like to give it treatment. Yes, it's okay to put it down. Yeah. Yeah. So like, can you slaughter a sick animal? Yeah, like so, like animals that we can't eat. Yes, like, animals that we can't eat, or like if an animal commits zina, we stone it. No, I'm just no, but like animals we can't eat, they're different, whatever ways that they use to kill them. But I think they use injections, right? Like they use a lethal injection to kill. Yeah, they put some kind of like euthanization injection. I think that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. As for animals we can eat, what do? We slaughter them and we eat them. Like it's not a big deal. As long as like the animal's sickness doesn't affect the quality of the meat. And Allah knows best. But we'll stop here, inshallah. Do we have any questions? No, it's over.
I read about animals with
Slice of some. Yeah.
But there's a more backed up. It's like
They're not what?
it's like the controversy.
Sure. You don't know, but what is? I don't understand what the controversy is exactly.
Because some people say about the Prophet
Slice of some.
he should just move animals and they cope with some situations.
Uh-huh.
But other people say there are no established narrations.
So what, did he treat them badly?
No,
Yeah.
treat them badly.
Okay. Oh, yeah, so, I mean, so the thing is here, yeah. So the thing is like the hadith that talk about his animals. So there are a few that are established for sure. Did he have a camel? Yes, right. And we don't, he said, don't beat your camel, right? You know, he said that, or beat it lightly if you wanted to get it to move. Like you have all of these where it shows his treatment of them that are sahih, right? That are established. As for the specific ones, like, you know, how he dealt with a cat here or how he dealt with a dog here, he drank, yeah, like, you know, these type of, he drank water from after the cat drank from it. So he said it was permissible. As for him drinking from it, this is debatable. This is debatable. I definitely do agree with you. But sometimes people like to exaggerate to show, oh, look, you know, look at the humanity of the Prophet ﷺ. But I mean, you have so many other examples of him. It's not necessary to make up examples to show, you know, his humanity, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Any other questions, comments? Yes. You're gonna have to speak up a little bit. I'm sorry. So siblings, the dynamic is different. The dynamic is different. I'm sorry. Even with age, like, so here, is anybody exempt from receiving advice? No, right? You know, whether it be your siblings or otherwise, like, can I advise my parents? Yeah, absolutely, right? There's nothing wrong with that. The question is, in the case of siblings, is there authority? Depends on the culture, right? It really depends on the culture. But in a lot of cultures, even where there is like some kind of semblance of authority, is it anywhere as near as strong as the parental authority? No, right? It's not. So it's very difficult to come in as an authoritative figure to dictate to your siblings what they should or what they can't do. The way that we talk to them, the way that we deal with them, it has to be, it's very different, right? It's very different. The one thing that most of us as siblings fail at is establishing the relationship first, right? We'll take it for granted that we're the older brother or that we're the older sister. Like, because I am the older brother or because I'm the older sister, you need to stop doing this or you need to stop doing that. when the reality is, it's like when it comes to authority, like you might be like a little bit higher, but it's not enough to dictate now what this person can do. And because I'm not in a position where I can actually dictate where this person can do, I have to make sure that I have a good relationship with them. And at the end of the day, and I don't mean to belittle this in any way, but at the end of the day, if I'm advising my brother to pray and he doesn't pray, the sin's not on me. Because who's responsible for his upbringing? The parents. Like, I can try to help, like, you know what I mean? There are certain things I can try to do, but at the end of the day, if he doesn't listen to me, so their accountability is two levels when it comes to parents. So a person might be like, oh, you know, if my son doesn't pray, will I be held accountable as a father or as a mother? No, but you can be accountable for giving bad tarbiyah, for raising him improperly, right? There can definitely be a sin for that, but there can't be a sin when my son reaches age and he doesn't pray. That's because now he's independent, and I don't carry, like, I can't carry my son's sins unless I specifically taught him not to pray, or I specifically taught him to lie. At that point, I would carry the sin and I would carry the burden. But you know, it's with siblings, it's different. The dynamic is very different. So like I said, siblings, there might be a little bit more, there's a level of closeness because of the blood relation. But the first thing I would do, and you know, and I'm sure many of us have failed at this, is establishing a good relationship first before, because that way, you know what's going to happen. It's very natural to gravitate toward people who you have a good relationship to seek advice. And being a sibling, the advantage is like the access, right? You live in the same house, sometimes you share the same room, like, and because of that access, it becomes easier to talk to them. Yeah.
I would again ask about an exception.
Yeah.
You say siblings don't have much older
Authority. Yeah.
except when it comes to inheritance.
The older sibling doesn't get any more than the younger. Like I could be like, if there could be a 20-year gap between me and my younger brother, I will get the same amount of money that he does. Royalties? I don't know. That's not Islamic. It's like that's political. Go complain to the queen. Yes. I'm sorry. Spouses. So is there an element of authority with spouses? Yes, there is. Right. So, but is the authority absolute? No. Right. You know, the authority has to be within a domain, and also the authority has to be such where it actually nurtures the relationship. Right. So can a husband exert his authority over his wife? Yeah, absolutely. Right. He can do that. But will the exertion of that authority bring them closer together, or will it just further drive a wedge in the relationship? And that's something important to, you know, can I stop my wife from going to see her parents? Yeah, I can. Is it a good idea? Probably not. Right. But does that mean that there are times where I can be like, no, not today? Like, you know, I mean, like there's too many things going on. Like we have to take the kids to all these things. At that point, I'd be like, yeah, you know, like I can exert my authority in that situation, even if she gets upset. Why? Because I have justifications. The justifications, they might be subjective, but it's important. Like, you know what I mean? Like at the end of it all, she might say, oh, well, you didn't let me go to my father's house or my mother's house that day, or whatever the case might be. I'd be like, yeah, because we had XYZ going on, and then you went the following weekend. So you know, there definitely is a give and take, and there is a level of authority, but when it comes to how to exert that authority, there's a very fine balance in determining, okay, what is the best way for this authority to be exerted so that it actually brings the relationship closer together, right? Because if you just keep imposing, the marriage isn't going to last really long, right? It's just not. And men they'll abuse their powers in like two ways, right? They'll use the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, where he said to Mu'adh, had a woman been ordered to make sajda to anybody, she would be ordered to make sajda to her husband, right? So this is a question now. Is that sajda in terms of the honor he should have in her eyes, or is it because of the obedience? Right? Valid question. And every other position, every time sajda is mentioned in the Quran or the Sunnah, when it doesn't have to do with Allah, what does the sajda have to do with? What does the prostration symbolize? Honor. So that's it. It's not a proof for obedience. It's a proof for honoring, if anything. And honor, again, it's subjective, like we had talked about. but I mean, of course, there's a sense of authority. You know, الرجال قوامون على النساء. You know, I mean, like there's a sense of authority that's there. How the authority is exerted, this has to be by somebody wise. But there is abuse in these two things. Like number one is the obedience thing. The second one is the divorce, right? So you find a lot of abuse from men in these two things. Like, no, you know, I'm the qawwam. You had been ordered to make sajda if it wasn't haram to me, etc. So therefore, you have to do X, Y, Z. Okay. Or if you don't do this, I'm going to divorce you. Or if you do this, I'm going to divorce. Like, and the divorce cases that I receive, I was like, I tell a lot of these brothers, Allah gave you an entire dictionary. Like He gave you an entire dictionary of words to chastise, to warn, to exhort, to, you know what I mean? Like to try to get whatever point that you wanted to get across. You, like an idiot, decided to use this one, and there's nothing I can do for you. Like, you literally had millions of other words, literally, like words you can even make up. But you decided not to. Like, that's not my fault. That's not my problem. But yeah, but it's important to find that balance. And so how do you find that balance? The balance, it's with communication, right? So that's something that's really fundamental to any relationship, whether it be relationships with others or relationships with our spouses. All right. See all of you next week, inshallah. Inshallah, next week, we're actually going to define ghiba, define backbiting, what it is and what it entails. Ameen wa yak.